Business with a servant's heart. Welcome to the podcast. Inspiration, motivation takes. Listen to the podcast. We're all about to talk about life. Our guests will share their life story. We want you to success in life and business. We're ready and we will start shortly. We're gonna talk about life. We're going to speak on business. You're gonna shine bright. We are going to witness. Business with a servant's heart. With hosts Steve, Ramona, and Ray. Inspiration, education talks. Listen to the podcast. Steve, Ramona.
Welcome, everyone, to Doing Business with a Servant's Heart podcast. I'm your host, Steve Ramona. I am so thrilled to have you join us today. We developed this podcast, and it's developed over over 600 shows of finding purpose of work and life, and that is a servant's heart. Implementing that in your work and life and making an impact and difference in people's lives. I get to do it daily. I guarantee you 99.9% of the time, you're going to be happy you did. It's so much fun to do and all that. We also have guests coming on to motivate you, inspire you, and educate you on a servant's heart, on business, on life, whatever it may be. But you're going to come away smiling or maybe crying, but crying for a good reason. And I love that. And I want to thank my sponsor. Well, forgot my call to action, audience. So your call to action today is after you listen to this incredible guest, I want you to think about how you're going to serve yourself and others today. It might be more, maybe go out, sit on the sun, read a book, and then go serve somebody. Go help somebody, whatever it may be, because the impact and difference you make is going to change your life. So go ahead and do that. And thank my sponsor, Pantheon. Join a community of high-income, successful entrepreneurs and business owners who are building a thought leader platform to help them grow and impact the world. To be part of that community, reach out to me and I'll get you all the information. Well, impact and difference comes in many different ways. And sometimes you go through a trauma in your life and it changes you. And guess what? It becomes a gift because now you can change other people and impact other people. My guest today has done that. We're going to talk more about that on the show. So let's bring in Monique. Monique, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Steve. I'm so happy to be here.
Your trauma, if you want to get into it, let's talk about, because that influenced how you are as an executive coach today, correct?
Yes, very much so. Yes. I had a very traumatic childhood, and at the age of 22, without having worked on any of my trauma, I went into the corporate world. So I can honestly say that at that time frame in my life, I was not serving myself. I was not working on myself, doing anything to grow and improve. So when I went into the corporate world, I was faced with toxic environments, toxic leaders who also had not worked on themselves. And they were trying to lead. They were trying to be good leaders. I was trying to be a good employee, but I kept being triggered by other people's behaviors. And I wasn't such a great employee because of that. So over time, I realized I needed to start working on myself, healing my own trauma. And as I did that, I became a better person, a better employee. And then I realized that my role in the corporate world was becoming easier for me. At that time, I was doing corporate training, internal coaching within organizations, still reporting to people who probably should not have been in leadership. But I realized the importance of when you work on yourself, you become a better person, a better leader. You can serve others better once you've served yourself. Yeah. So went on to leave the corporate world and become an executive coach, working with leaders. And even though in my coaching practice, I'm not a therapist, I don't specifically work with them on their trauma, but it comes up in coaching, because in coaching, they start to realize that they also may have been traumatized either as a child or in previous workplaces by toxic leaders, toxic workplaces, and that they need to be working on their own behaviors, whether it be communication or leadership skills, things like that. So I found that by working on myself and continuing to work on myself, I have been a better coach because of that.
Fantastic model. You said something very interesting. You had leaders, didn't have leadership skills. I'm kind of paraphrasing. What is your insight, people listening that go, I got this manager, CEO who's truly not a leader. How did you handle it? How should they handle it?
Well, usually it shows up where managers are micromanaging. They refuse to give feedback. They refuse to communicate. They have very difficult personalities. And when they're given feedback, they don't do anything with it. So they are not improving themselves. And that can show up with teams that are underperforming, low morale, high absenteeism, high turnover. So those are the typical symptoms in a workplace that's toxic, or being a team being run by a toxic leader. And many times when people come to coaching, they do report those kinds of things happening and they're not sure what to do about it. And the first place we start is not with the manager that they're complaining about. We start with themselves. And we start looking at their own behaviors and how are they responding. And that's usually when we find out that there's been some type of trauma going on for that person also. So it always starts with yourself. And the book that I wrote that has just recently been published and launched is really all about that. I incorporate some of my journey into the book, but I've also filled the book with case studies of people that I've coached and how I've helped them work through some of these things. And many times we find that when someone starts working on themselves, it somehow improves the relationship with this toxic manager that they're talking about.
It's a servant's heart. Work yourself first, and you can spread the joy out to everybody else. You've had 5,000 hours of coaching or more. What's a common challenge you've seen some executive leaders?
Well, as an executive coach, it's a huge umbrella for a lot of different things that I work with people on right now. It seems to be layoffs, career changes, people being unsure about their career trajectory. They may have been employed by this employer for 20 or 30 years maybe, and now they have to make different decisions about what they're going to do with their life. And they've never interviewed for a job. They've always gotten promoted somehow without having to interview. And now they're realizing they don't have even the basic skills to sell themselves in an interview, promote themselves. They aren't active on LinkedIn. They don't have an updated resume. So right now, that's a big concern with many of the people that I'm coaching. And I've been doing a lot of career coaching, which falls under that umbrella of executive coaching. But even that is more than just having an updated resume and an updated LinkedIn profile. We delve into what are your values as a person? Who are you as an employee? Who are you as a leader? What message are you trying to put out there in the workplace? Because if you don't know that yourself, you can't sell that in an interview. So you really have to know yourself, be working on yourself in order to understand your own career path.
Leads to a great question. A number of my audience are business owners looking to exit. What's a tip or two you can give them going, because they're nervous. I mean, it's like, what do I do after? And kind of you answer a little bit with career, but leading up to it, they're still in the mix of the war, the battle. They're 2 or 3 years out. What advice do you give somebody like that?
Well, I work with people around looking at some of their life goals, the bigger picture of life, because some people really decide they want to retire, but they're afraid to because they don't want to be stagnant or bored. So if that's a possibility for them, retirement, then we look at other things they can do to feel fulfilled. Many times it's volunteer work, or it's travel, or it's more learning and expanding their knowledge base. So if it's retirement, we go down that path and I try to help them formulate a plan, a strategy, and even down to some people want a daily schedule because they're afraid they're going to sleep too late and not make it to the gym and things like that. Other people who are not ready to retire, we look at their skills, their strengths, their passion, because many times the skills that they're using in the workplace can be transferred to other places and other things. Doesn't even have to be the same role. It could be anything else. It's the skill set that we look at. And that's really what sells a person, is their skill set, because they are the only ones with their own unique skill set. So I tell them, this is part of your brand. So if you truly are confused about where to go, let's look at the skills and then look at your passions and see if we can fit them both together. It's a bit like a puzzle.
Yeah, it is. And what's interesting in self-worth is what I talk to my friends or people I'm talking to, they're like, oh, what do I do? Oh my God, I've been 30 years running this multi-million-dollar company. And I love how you answer that, because it does keep their self-worth going, because that's what kills a lot of people is they just sit around and don't do anything. And then their self-worth drops. That's where you come in. Right.
And I think there's some statistics out there that talk about how people, if they retire and they're not doing anything, the death rate increases.
Wow.
For those people. So really it's important to stay healthy and busy and productive, and it keeps your mind busy, and you'll have a much more healthy and fulfilling life that way.
Yeah, and I think if they learn to serve in such a great way, maybe it's a board of a nonprofit. And there's many things that you teach, which I love and coach. So there's trauma, but there's also microtrauma. What is the difference, and how do you handle microtrauma in your workplace?
I think trauma is the bigger, more obvious things that have happened to people, even whether it be childhood or in adulthood. It could be abuse or assault or being in a war, things like that. Microtrauma in the workplace, it's more subtle. It can be gaslighting. It can be a boss that withholds feedback, so you never know how you're doing. You don't know if you're doing a great job or not. Or the bosses that say, well, you'll know if you're doing a bad job, I'll tell you. But that still doesn't help much. So it could be little subtle things like that kind of get a person to doubt their own actions, their own behavior. They start to feel like they're walking on eggshells. It could be a boss that suddenly blows up with inconsistent behavior. So you're never quite sure how you're going to be treated in a meeting. It could be subtle forms of verbal abuse that take place. Even having someone make fun of your name is a type of microtrauma. So many times it's so subtle that people don't realize it's wrong or that it's microtrauma. And so they let it go. They might have this little feeling inside that didn't really feel right, but maybe it's normal, and they don't really say anything. And then it builds and it builds. And a person may have trouble setting boundaries about that. Like, don't say that to me anymore. Or they might have trouble asking for feedback. So it can affect the person's behavior, because then they're not sure the right way to respond to that. And they let it go, and it builds up, and it subtly chips away at their self-worth.
Yeah. And trauma is pretty, like you said, it's pretty obvious. I was sexually abused as a young person. I almost died by suicide, all those massive.
Right.
But it sounds like microtrauma could be extremely more dangerous, because like you said, you kind of just let it go, but it festers. Am I thinking correctly about that?
Yes. And if you're in one company and you're treated that way by your boss or within a team, and then you think, well, I don't like this, I'm going to leave. So you change jobs. And you might see the same thing happening somewhere else because you never learned how to set boundaries. You never learned how to push back and say something about it. You never had a voice. You never used your voice. So many times in coaching, I help people learn how to use their voice and how to have those conversations with their manager. Even if it's a conversation about, look, I really want your feedback. Let's meet once a month and talk about what you think, how you think I'm doing as an employee. And sometimes it's a simple conversation like that, but people are really terrified to have those kinds of conversations. But until you start to stand up for yourself and take care of yourself, you will have those problems no matter what company you go to. And that's what was happening to me. I changed jobs multiple times, trying to get away from the toxicity and the poor leadership. But it kept happening to me because I wasn't working on myself. I wasn't taking care of myself and having a voice.
And it sounds like everybody has microtrauma. I mean, it could be I didn't get that sale today, to my wife was late to an appointment, or again, something that's not rocking your world, but it sits in that little brain. You know what? I love being a host of this show because you just taught me something. I never thought about it that way. And audience, I hope you're learning. She's magical. She's a rock star because that little thing could change your life. And it has changed my life thinking about the microtraumas I've dealt with because of what you're saying. Let's dive into the book, The Survive and Thrive Toolkit for Leaders. It's a long title for a powerful message. What inspired you to write it?
Well, long ago, I tried writing my autobiography because I felt even back then I had a story to tell. And I couldn't quite market it to publishers. So I put it away, forgot about it. And then as the years went by and I began coaching and racked up these coaching hours, over 5,000 hours, and worked with all these different people, I kept hearing their feedback about me and about my coaching and how much their lives were changing. And I kept seeing their successes and their wins. And I thought, wow, I've got to write about this. And I really want people to know that you can change, you can work on yourself with or without a coach, and you can still change. And I also wanted people to know about the tools that I use in coaching to facilitate this change. So I started putting together the stories and the feedback I was getting and weaving in my own story. So in a way, it was a bit like the autobiography, but the whole book wasn't focused just on me. It's focused on coaching itself. And I also am very aware of the fact that not everyone can afford to have a coach. They're not fortunate enough to be able to pay for a coach, or their employers won't pay for coaching. So I wanted to use the book as a resource for people who could not afford a coach. And I really believe there's not enough resources out there for leaders to be good leaders. And if there are resources, it's all theory. And I wanted my book to be the same way my sessions are. We talk about a topic, we unpack a topic, and then they're expected to go take action. They're expected to go apply the knowledge in their workplace and go practice the skill, whether it's communication that we've talked about or having that conversation with their boss. They leave each session with action items. So the book is set up the same way. After every chapter, there is a list of action items that they have to do, and that can be done on their own. It's better for a coach to work with them because the coach can hold them accountable, but it's not absolutely mandatory. So I tried to set up the book so that people could use it on their own.
Step in the right direction, as they say. Little 1% every day. If you start your own, get a coach and move on. I love that. I'm loving this book. What's one powerful lesson I'm going to learn when I read the book? I know there's many, I'm sure.
Yeah, you will learn a solid process of how to develop yourself. There's 8 steps in the first pillar of the book. The book has 2 pillars. And in the first pillar, there's 8 steps or 8 chapters on how you can work on each area of your life to really upgrade it. And if you do that, then you're a much better leader, person, father, brother, so that you can move forward in a healthier way in your life.
I'm loving this book, Monique, because it's not taught in school. You have trauma as a young person or a teen, or right now, you have to go to your library, go to a book like yours. And I love that, because after COVID, this is even worse than it's before COVID. And we all know that mental health has grown massively. What's one piece of advice you give somebody that's had trauma?
I think many people stuff that down because they're embarrassed. So I think you have to admit to yourself that you've had trauma, and then get help in whatever way is best for you. Not everyone can run to a therapist right away. I've used multiple different modalities in my lifetime to work on my trauma, but you first have to own it and admit it to yourself.
Yeah, we're coming to the end here. So what I'm hearing from you, and especially you, because you've been through the trauma, you're always working on this. This is not something you take a test and you get your A and go, okay, trauma's all over. So this is an ongoing lifetime thing, right?
It is.
Okay.
And I once had a client that said, I can't start coaching yet because I'm in therapy working on something, but I'm almost done working on my trauma, and then I'll start coaching. And I said, well, your work is never going to be done with your trauma. It ebbs and flows. I go into remission where I'm okay for a while, and then something pops up in life that triggers me, and I'm back using my trauma team, is what I call it. Yep. So it is a forever journey. It just ebbs and flows.
Is that one of the big steps to know this is a forever journey? Because I would think people are doing like your person you just mentioned, like, hey, I got done with my trauma. Hey, it's over and life is beautiful. Is that one of the bigger first steps?
It was for me. Yeah. I remember going through a very difficult period of working on my trauma. It actually lasted 3 years, that particular period. And I was so relieved when I was done. But then within 6 months, something else came up again. And it was a huge realization for me that, wow, I am never going to be done, but that's okay. Because I realized that for each time that trauma pops back up and I do more work, I become a better, stronger person, and I'm a better coach for my clients.
That's so beautifully said. You are a huge blessing because you just are open, honest, and humble and transparent. I love that about you. I appreciate it. Let's have some fun. I'd like to end with a fun question. That was pretty serious. Great show, by the way. So you've got a table at a restaurant reserved for you. It's a table of 4. You're obviously going to sit in one of the chairs. Who would you invite, dead or alive? Why would you invite them to sit at this table? And what food would you order?
Well, I would invite my mother. She's passed. She passed when I was 7. That was part of my trauma. I would invite my 40-year-old daughter. And I would invite Sister Felicia. She is a Catholic nun that took me under her wing when I was a single parent going through a very rough time. And then the 4th, I would say Buddha. I have converted from Catholicism to Buddhism. So Buddha would be the 4th. And what would we eat? Well, my favorite food, which I don't have often, is pizza. So there would be a table full of pizza.
What a treat. Yeah, this is your treat day. Or some people call it cheat day. Well, I don't like that word, but your treat day. I love that. I want to thank you. I'm going to be very transparent on this recording and sharing with people. I just realized I lost my dad in 17. He was so close to me, but I'm feeling now that I have trauma that I just realized that I got to keep working on. So thank you. You just taught me something. God bless you.
Wow.
So revelating is the word that comes to my head. Powerful. So thank you. And audience, she just coached me for 20 minutes and look what happened. Much more needs to be done, I'm sure, but that's very cool. I'm rarely speechless, but I am right now. This, again, such a great show. I know people listening, especially people with trauma or have friends that have trauma, how can they reach out and connect with you?
Well, my email address is monique@mdconsultingglobal.com. My website is the same thing, mdconsultingglobal.com. So they can get to me in either of those two ways. And my website has a lot of free resources. So they can go there and download a lot of information and start educating themselves.
Beautiful. Audience, reach out to her. Here's your call to action at the end. Subscribe to the YouTube channel. Yeah, hear it all the time, podcasts. And it's great that people say that, but here's why I say it. This is the journey. You're listening to Monique. Like I just told you guys, it just reminded me of my dad. When he died, it was a trauma to me. It still is. Things I see trigger me. Well, you might have a friend, a family member, or somebody you just met that's dealing with trauma. You know what the greatest gift you can give is this podcast. Give them a link. Say, I've been listening to Monique. I think there's some things there that can help you. Take a peek. And then they go through the journey of reaching out to Monique. Maybe they hire Monique. Maybe they just get a piece of advice from her free resources. But you've helped them. The greatest gift in the world is a podcast link. Share those like they're gifts. Don't share them to sell sponsors and things. And that's okay. I'm not complaining about that. I'm going a little deeper because this is powerful. I know I share this link about Monique and what she talked about today is going to help some people I know. So go ahead and do that. Me and Monique want to thank you all so much for watching or listening to this podcast. We'll see you all on the next episode of Doing Business with a Servant's Heart. Have a great day, everyone.